Welcome to NieuwRechts Europe. Today we're discussing again another cover-up scandal in the UK, one of insane proportions. Because as it turns out, the UK leaked 100,000 names of Afghans that has helped the UK army in Afghanistan with the threat that they might have been retaliated by the Taliban. And instead that the government is taking accountability or is sharing transparency on the mistakes, they're covering up with a super injunction, which is very unheard of. That means basically that the media has been silenced and we're not allowed to report on it. And the real question that we should ask, what are they trying to cover up? The safety of the Afghans or their own reputation? Well, to get a better understanding of this whole scandal with me today is Daniel de Liever. I'm so excited for him to be with us at NieuwRechts because he's literally one of the best journalists that we have in the Netherlands. So Daniel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the kind words and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, even though the topic itself is kind of a shock. I think it's good that we can discuss it today.
I agree because actually I learned about this scandal because of your article that you wrote for NieuwRechts, and I tried to comprehend the magnitude and what is happening. I mean, they were bringing now some of those Afghans, I think it's almost 24,000 to the UK. This has costed the British taxpayer £7 billion. This is an insane magnitude of the cover-up. Please help us understand what's going on.
Okay, so basically what we need to see is how a small mistake can lead actually to huge consequences. So in February of 2022, there was a British military who accidentally, at least that's what we know for now, had sent an email to Afghanistan with tens of thousands of names of people in Afghanistan that used to work with the UK in its military operations when I guess NATO, America, UK, etc. were still active over there. And of course, these are seen by the Taliban and others that were fought against as treason. So the problem there immediately was that if this was leaked to the Taliban, and there was no, I guess, way to be sure if it would be leaked to the Taliban, then these people and their entire families could be massacred. And therefore, what the UK decided, okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a huge operation to bring, I guess, many people to the UK to see who actually is in danger. It became a huge mess because, you know, if they would at least have said, okay, we made a mistake, let's do this, then I guess the people of the UK could have decided what they would have wanted to do, because we're talking about 100,000 people. That's a lot of people for any country. But they decided, no, what we're going to do is we're going to decide that we're going to spend up to 7 billion. We don't actually know how much they spent, but they just made a budget. And it's not really clear yet how much of the budget was really spent. So hopefully soon we will find out. But they, like you said already yourself, they forced the media to stay silent with a super injunction. And so far we have almost 24,000 people that are either in the UK or soon to go to the UK, and we don't even know if this is the end or not.
Well, let's look at some other statistics. You said that 24,000, or I think around 24,000, are now being brought or have been brought to the UK, and I'm wondering, like, have all these people been really checked that they actually in fact did help the UK army? Because there's also a risk that some of them are sexual perpetrators, maybe they have been part of ISIS, or maybe still are sympathisants of ISIS. We don't know what we're importing. And also beyond that, what I also heard is that each of these people can bring 14 to 15 of their own family members to the UK. We already know that the UK is paying billions and billions and billions of support of mass migration. I mean, have these people even been vetted before they were allowed to enter the UK?
So the problem is that due to the super injunction, it's really hard to really clarify what knowledge is trustworthy and what not. So take it with a grain of salt, but from what we see now, there has not really been a good vetting process in the UK when it comes to this issue. We've seen it in the past in the UK, but even in other countries like the Netherlands, where I'm from, or in other countries like France, that the vetting process is left to be desired. So I'm afraid so that there's a pretty high chance that among these thousands of people, at least some of them might potentially be criminals.
And that's very worrisome. And even more so, what we see, of course, is that people are stopping to trust their government because this is yet another cover-up to protect their own reputation. There's zero accountability in the people that are responsible of this leak, and also the spending of that 7 billion in aid in this case. And I was reading through the comments because I really care about what the public thinks. In the end of the day, it is the UK citizens that have to deal with the consequences of this leak and unvetted migrants, Afghans that are entering their country. And overwhelmingly, people were saying, I'm so sorry what happened to them, but we don't want them in our country. They say that they want to abolish the government even. Like, this is causing huge side effects. What is your take on that? Do you understand where they're coming from, or do you think that the UK has moral obligations to help these Afghans?
It's a very good point. So far, what we know from an article in the Times is that most likely the Taliban now has this list, and tens to hundreds of the people have either been tortured to death or in other ways severely injured. This is what we know now. So just to give a little bit perspective on the scale of what we're dealing with. But I understand the UK people. If it was only these amount of people, then there would be no problem. But we already have, especially in the UK, they voted for Brexit predominantly because they wanted less illegal migration. And sadly, we have seen that illegal migration even went up after the Brexit. So people are done with this mass illegal migration, or what some people even call invasion. And therefore, I think there is not a lot of room left in UK society to take these people up, even if some of them you could make the case it would be moral to do so, but you also have a responsibility to your own society, to your own children and your own community.
Absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, if we're looking at what has been the damage, now they want to build whole villages to household these Afghans. Well, even British taxpayers who've been working for years and supporting the UK government by paying their taxes are last in the road to get a social housing or social security, whatever. And this is not the first scandal that we're talking about. I mean, it was only a couple of weeks ago that we found out about the grooming gangs. That horrible scandal where thousands of white girls, predominantly white girls, were molested by predominantly Pakistani men. And the government knew about it, yet they chose to be silent because they didn't want to cause any stir. It would cause an uproar in society. So they were protecting these Pakistani men over protecting their own girls. And it seems that they're doing that exactly the same thing again, partly also to save their own face. Let's also talk about a child maintenance service. Thousands of men killed themselves because they were forced to pay inflated prices as child support. Prices they could not even afford led to their desperation, led to them committing suicide. I spoke to a father of one of these victims. This also was known for decades by the UK government, and it seems that nobody wants to take accountability. They get away with it as well, and people want to have justice, otherwise they can no longer trust their government anymore. Daniel, from your perspective, are we talking about a wider pattern?
Definitely. I think, first of all, to comment shortly about the grooming gangs, I think this will be seen as the biggest scandal in recent UK history, maybe even UK history after World War II. I mean, this happened for what we know now, for at least 2 decades. It is tremendous to see that politicians, people that are supposed to protect the rule of law and supposed to protect their citizens, together with people from all part of, you could say, the legal system, have tried to cover this up, and people that have tried to, tell the story of these people. They have been humiliated, they have been, you could say, threatened, and I think this is going to be, if you look in the long term, one of the biggest scandals that we will have, maybe not even in UK history, but maybe in Western or European history. And sadly, what we see in the UK, as well as in, many other countries in the West, that there's this fear, normally it is the people that are served by the government. But nowadays we have this mindset that is actually the people serving the government. And this is, I think the reason for this is that the story that the government is telling is not appealing to the people. And normally in a free and democratic society like the ones we praise ourselves with, this means that the elites have to adapt. But they refuse because they think they know better. And therefore, they can project this in bullying the population and manipulating the population to actually get to a point where they either have to agree or comply. And if that doesn't work, it's simply covered up. And I think this is what we're seeing in the UK, also with attack on free speech, because, if you cannot talk about it, like we saw in this instance, then there's also not going to be criticism. It is almost, it feels like these practices is something you would see in the DDR, in communist Germany or other Soviet republics, not something you wish you would see in free countries nowadays in Europe.
I think it's so interesting what you're saying, because you're right. Like the elite, they have this idea that they know it better. And the public opinion now is that what the government should do in essence, and that's the primary job that they have, is to protect their own citizens and provide in social security. What we see now consequently in all of these scandals is that they rather protect others than their own native citizens, their own reputation. There is zero accountability. Even more so, it is the taxpayer that is working over hours, making living paycheck to paycheck, who is paying for all of this, yet is being put behind in line when it comes down to being provided with those necessities like safety and social security.
Exactly.
It's of course not only happening in the UK. You and I are both from the Netherlands. We both see it in our own country as well. We see it in the rest of Europe. What can we do to actually try to balance and restore trust in democracy, or even restore democracy on its own?
It's a very, very good question. I think there are three things that we need to do. The first one is maybe the most painful, and that is to accept that the view that many people have of where the state that we are as a country, as a continent, it's wrong. We are in a much dire state, and it means that also it will take a lot from all of us, a lot of sacrifice, to get to a point where we can have a positive outlook for the future again. And I think people nowadays, because we come from, you could say, one of the peak moments after World War II, where we had a great amount of wealth and trust in society, we had peace for most of Europe. We kind of become complacent. So I think one part is the personal responsibility here, that we have to accept that tough times are coming, they're needed to restore things, but we cannot only ask the government to do so. It also is going to take pain from us, even if it was maybe other people causing it. That's life, I would say. And the second thing that I would say is that to really get to a point where democracy is restored, I think we should be really careful what we see now with a lot of populist movements to just say, let's break down the entire system and then we'll take it from there. I rather just say, let's restore the system, because the system itself actually worked very well for many decades. And maybe the buildup of centuries basically showed that all our ancestors, they fought for this kind of way of living, and we should try to restore it. And that means that everybody on a local level needs to take responsibility. They need to inform themselves when it comes to things happening on a national level. And this already makes it much harder for governments to go in certain directions. And it also makes it easier for people to develop themselves maybe into the future leaders that we need in all these institutions. Because if we want to take back democracy, we need people to actually respect democracy in places of power. I think that's the second thing I would say. And the last thing that I think we should say is all the institutions that are really corrupt beyond repair. And I would look at things like, for example, a lot of the treaties we have among human rights that once were very noble, but now are out of control. I think first we need to get rid of those, so we actually have the room in our own countries to take back our sovereignty. And from there, we can always try to cooperate with each other. But first we need to restore our own house, because if your own house is on fire, you cannot really help others. And I think this should be the first focus.
Daniel, thank you so much. I really would like to highly urge all of our viewers to follow all of your work. What's the best way they can stay in touch and up to date with your work?
In general, you can go to NieuwRechts.nl. That is where I and some of my colleagues publish daily about the most important news, not only in the Netherlands, but also in Europe and the West in general. And if you want to get in touch with me personally, you can follow me on Twitter under my name, Daniel de Liever. You can always send me a message if you have any questions or anything else. And I think that's the best way to do it.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And of course, thank you so much for watching.